The millionaire's mother hadn't eaten in months, until the new cook served her dinner. For 3 months, the millionaire's mother had refused every meal placed before her. Doctors had examined her, nurses had begged her, and expensive specialists had warned that her body was growing dangerously weak. Yet every evening, the untouched plates were carried away exactly as they had arrived. Then, on the night a new cook served her a simple homemade dinner, something happened inside that mansion that no amount of money had ever been able to buy: hope. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of one caring heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Bright Kindness. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. The mansion belonged to Daniel Whitmore, a self-made millionaire whose name appeared in business magazines and whose company stretched across several cities. From the outside, his life looked perfect. He had wealth, influence, expensive cars, and a beautiful home surrounded by gardens. But inside that enormous house lived the one person whose suffering money could not fix, his 87-year-old mother, Eleanor. After losing her husband, Eleanor had slowly withdrawn from the world. At first, she stopped attending family dinners. Then she stopped leaving her bedroom. Eventually, she stopped eating. Doctors said there was nothing physically wrong with her that could explain the refusal. Her body was simply giving up because her heart had lost its reason to keep fighting. Daniel tried everything. He hired private nurses, nutritionists, therapists, and chefs who had cooked for celebrities. They prepared expensive steaks, delicate soups, imported fruits, and meals designed specifically for elderly patients. Eleanor barely looked at them. Her eyes remained fixed on the window, where she watched the garden her husband had once tended. Daniel visited her every night, but his business calls and constant travel had created a distance between them that neither knew how to cross. He loved his mother deeply, but somewhere along the way, he had mistaken providing money for providing presents. Then came Maria, the new cook. Maria was not famous, wealthy, or trained in a luxury restaurant. She was a single mother who had spent years cooking in small homes and caring for her family. On her first morning at the Whitmore mansion, the head housekeeper warned her about Eleanor. She told Maria not to take the old woman's refusal personally because everyone had tried and failed. But when Maria quietly entered Eleanor's room that afternoon, she noticed something nobody else had noticed. On the bedside table sat an old photograph of Eleanor and her husband standing beside a tiny kitchen. Maria studied the picture and realized Eleanor was holding a wooden spoon. Instead of asking about food, Maria asked about the photograph. For the first time in months, Eleanor looked away from the window. That evening, Maria ignored the mansion's expensive kitchen equipment and went outside to the small herb garden. She picked fresh rosemary, washed a few potatoes, found some carrots, and prepared the kind of simple dinner her own mother used to make. She roasted the vegetables slowly, prepared soft mashed potatoes, and cooked a small piece of chicken with herbs. There was nothing luxurious about it. It was simply warm, familiar, and made with care. Maria carried the plate into Eleanor's room and placed it gently on the table. She didn't pressure her. She didn't call a nurse. She simply sat nearby and began telling Eleanor about her own childhood, about the tiny kitchen where her mother had cooked meals for the entire family even when there was barely enough food in the house. For several minutes, Eleanor remained silent. Then she looked at the plate. Her trembling hand slowly reached toward the fork. Maria froze. Eleanor took one tiny bite. Then another. Outside the room, a nurse covered her mouth in disbelief. The head housekeeper immediately called Daniel, who was still at his office. He rushed home, expecting another medical emergency, only to stop outside his mother's bedroom when he saw something he hadn't seen in months. His mother was eating. Daniel stood there with tears filling his eyes. But the greatest surprise came when Eleanor finally spoke. She whispered that the food reminded her of the first dinner she had cooked for her husband when they were young and had almost no money. She had spent years believing that everything she loved had disappeared. She had stopped eating because every meal felt like another reminder that her husband was gone and her son was always somewhere else. Daniel walked into the room and sat beside her. For the first time in years, he didn't check his phone. He simply held his mother's hand. He apologized, not for failing to buy the right food, but for failing to notice that she had been starving for something money couldn't purchase: companionship. From that night forward, dinner changed inside the Whitmore mansion. Daniel began eating with his mother every evening. Maria cooked simple meals, and Eleanor slowly regained her strength. Weeks later, she was walking through the garden again, touching the roses her husband had planted decades earlier. One evening, Daniel offered Maria a large bonus, but she smiled and told him the greatest reward was seeing Eleanor smile again. Daniel eventually created a foundation in his mother's name to provide meals and companionship to elderly people living alone. And Eleanor became the heart of it. Months after that first dinner, she stood in the garden holding Maria's hand and watching volunteers deliver warm meals to lonely seniors. She finally understood that sometimes a person doesn't need a miracle. Sometimes they just need someone to sit beside them long enough to remind them that they still matter. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness can change lives, and subscribe to Bright Kindness. One small act of compassion may seem insignificant, but to someone who feels forgotten, it can become the reason they keep going. Before we end, comment, "Kindness can heal," if you believe that a caring heart can bring hope back into someone's life. Because in the end, the millionaire's greatest treasure was never his fortune. It was the moment his mother picked up a fork again, and realized she wasn't alone.